Well, the U.S. national debt is expected to hit a record high as soon as this week, crossing a major threshold of $40 trillion. Our congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins joins us now to explain why that milestone is a warning sign for many economists. Lisa, remind us what this all means and why it all matters.
We have spent so long in a position where a near infinite deficit has not mattered, and we're now finally reaching the point where it does matter, and it's really, really bad.
National debt is important to us because it helps drive the engine of our government, but it is also a cornerstone of the world economy. Those sometimes can be good things, but let me explain why this level is now a new red flag. Let's take a look and define terms. We are fast approaching $40 trillion in gross or total national debt. One major problem is that interest alone now costs more than $1.2 trillion a year for U.S. taxpayers. That's according to the Federal Reserve. So we now spend more on interest on...
I remember less than a year ago talking about how our interest payments exceeded $1 trillion a year.
Than we do on national defense, and basically more than almost anything else that government does. Rising debt also adds inflationary pressure to the economy. We spoke with Carolyn Bordeaux of the Concord Coalition, and she explained the concern if this red ink line keeps rising.
Eventually, we will hit some sort of very serious fiscally induced economic crisis, which means that massive debt we're carrying, we will keep adding to it, and eventually it will cause a very serious economic crisis, and that can take many different forms. Often it takes the form of hyperinflation.
I remember being taught in school that 19 trillion in debt was really bad, and now it's 40, damn. Yeah, unfortunately, it's frustrating for me because for a long time, the U.S. debt has been a non-issue. The U.S. could easily maintain a debt right now of about 15 to 20 trillion with a negligible, possibly largely positive impact on the global economy because you want some marginal frictional debt that you can use to maintain other countries' holds on your currency. You want them to have a large USD reserve because we're the global reserve currency, and their investment in our treasury means that they have an incentive to make sure that our money stays strong so that when we repay those loans, the dollar's not worth, bullshit. Unfortunately, those arguments work when you're at 10, 15, maybe 20 trillion in debt. They don't work when you're 40 trillion in debt. Over the past 5 years, our deficit has skyrocketed. A lot of it was because of COVID under Biden. It's not necessarily his fault, though like all Democrats, he was too much of a pussy to do the taxing you need to do to fix the problem. But under Trump too, it's just going to the moon. It's just going to the fucking moon.
High interest rates, really, really serious problems that will be very, very difficult for us to get out of.
And that future is not
We won't. We can't fix it. It's too late. We can't do it
yet. So why worry about it so much? Because neither Congress nor the White House is really addressing the core of this problem.
Obviously, all of this has been a long time in the making. Lisa, remind us how we got here in the first place.
Well, part of it have been specific economic crises, but another part has been very distinct crisis of leadership. If you look at the debt for the past 50 years...
The debt to GDP ratio, in my opinion, is complete fucking bullshit. What's much, much more important, in my opinion, is interest payments as a percentage of the federal budget. Debt to GDP doesn't work because GDP is horseshit. Right now, the GDP growth in America is being held up by 8 companies trading with each other. Total bullshit. But if you compare the interest as a percentage of federal spending, that's the real issue. In fact, hold on. Chart U.S. debt interest as percentage of federal spending. Well, here's a graph from visualcapitalist.com, which I'm not, but they have a useful graph here. If the fucking webpage could load. Yeah, it's really going up right now. Unfortunately, the Visual Capitalist is actually quite reliable about providing useful info like this. All right, well, I'll keep that in mind. Good resource. Yeah, this is capping at 2023. This isn't even including the past couple years. But you'll notice a near vertical line right here. Let me see if I can... It's the unreliability of this fucking... Just go back to the goddamn PBS NewsHour
segment. You can
segment.
see where it rocketed up in those two places. One of those was 2009 with the recession, another 2020 with COVID. But you can also see that that even as the government flooded the zone to try and rescue the economy there here in recent years, you can see it has risen outside of those economic shocks. And both Republicans and Democrats, we see our two most recent presidents there, have seen the debt rise sharply under their watch. Now, as for Congress, it has repeatedly solved problems. I've sat here and talked about it by just spending more money. And Republicans have continued to cut taxes. All of that sounds great, except we don't have the money to do those things. Really.
Oh, that sounds great. You're a fucking idiot.
When you look at our debt line. So what's happening right now is a lack of leadership and honestly, not just financial sobriety, but honesty about the problem.
I mean, $40 trillion is such a huge amount. Yeah. It is almost incomprehensible.
Financial sobriety won't work. This is not an amount of debt that can be paid off by balancing the budget. It's not. It's genuinely not. No amount of finagling with existing spending is going to change it. It's like having an annual household income of $100,000 and finding out you're in debt for like $1.2 billion. You are never it's not even. You're never paying it off. You people can't even pay off your damn student loans. Not the hate. I haven't paid those off yet, because the interest payments on them are low. Is this even possible to solve genuinely? Yeah, you would just have to tax. You would have to do so much more than tax the rich. You would have to do so much more than tax the rich. We're talking taxing unrealized capital gains. We're talking about a wealth tax. We're talking about like a militant Cayman Islands excursion where we go after all of those illegal offshore tax-free accounts. We're talking about a war on capital here. We're not talking about we're just going to up the interest, like the income tax or whatever. We're talking about an unbelievable commitment to the bit that no president could do. No president could do it. Nobody has the balls. And even if they did, if any president tried to do this, it would be massively unpopular and they would probably get killed by Jeff Bezos or whatever. So no, it's not going to happen.
Comprehensible. How do we begin to get our heads around it?
Right. We thought about this. First, I just want folks to look at the number. Let's look at it. That's 40 with 12 zeros after it. That's what 40 trillion looks like. What does that mean? It's almost impossible. One way you can think of it is if you stacked up $1 bills, we hear this a lot, it would actually go all the way around the sun if it was 40 trillion. Another thing that might not make much sense. So we tried to come up with a more tangible way of expressing this. Let's talk about houses in America. Right now, the average single-family home costs about $400,000. And if you do the simple math here, 100 homes would be $40 million. But then let's zoom out to all of America. That's where you hit $40 trillion. That is more than the worth of every single family home in this country. We have about roughly 90 million single family homes. So if you want to know what $40 trillion is, just look at the houses around you. It is the worth of every single family house in this country.
You mentioned the lack of leadership on this. Is anyone in Congress talking about how to tackle this?
There are some. But by and large, they just talk about their own slice of it, and they're unwilling to compromise over the tough things that they need to do to get us here. One example is
U.S. interest payments as percentage of revenue has been similarly high in the past. Yeah, but this is being distorted a little bit by the Reagan-era allergy to actually taxing people. See, this is as a percentage of revenue, not as a percentage of federal spending, because Reagan might have dropped the government's intake, but he sure did raise spending. The problem really is just that there's no level we can drop spending to reasonably that would allow revenue to overtake it. It's just not possible. The rich dodge federal income tax, not even increased, they pay $0. Yeah, it's totally inadequate on its own, totally inadequate.
The Freedom Caucus in the House, they have been pushing for tighter budgets for years, but they actually did not get the kind of spending cuts that they campaigned on. And also, in truth, they're not willing to give on taxes and revenues. They want revenue cuts. There's a big debate over what tax cuts do. Senator Rand Paul is an example of a senator, who's someone who votes against spending bills repeatedly over the national debt, but very few members of Congress actually do. And no one is talking about the big picture like Social Security reform. reform, Medicare. What's more, two of the biggest voices here are leaving Congress this session. That's Republican Congressman Dave Schweikert of Arizona and also Democratic Congressman John Larson of Connecticut. They spent a lot of time talking about Social Security. Carolyn Bordeaux points out that one of the issues here is that
global markets aren't buying U.S. debt as much anymore, so we can't rob Peter to pay Paul like we used to. Yep. I mean, with that in mind, you know, you can see Treasury yields have been going up lately, which the shorthand of that, and I'm not going to pretend to understand, you know, monetary policy perfectly, but the gist of it is that in order to raise money, the government has to sell bonds, and the yield on those bonds, how much money they return in interest, is a good way of setting a understanding of how much the government has to incentivize buying them. So the fact that the yield is increasing means that the government has to offer a higher and higher return in order to incentivize people to buy those bonds, which means the government pays a higher interest on the existing debt that it has. The higher the yield goes, the more expensive it becomes to borrow money in general anyway, and the Fed tends to intervene, and the Fed would have to raise the interest rates in order to tamp down on the inflationary effects of the current economy, which would only mean we, the US government, spend more money on the interest on our debt. Yeah, Hyperion. Earlier this year, the United States' credit rating got downgraded, which is pretty funny. It's not great. It's not great. It's not good. What is this? Somebody linked this. Somebody said this is relevant. Why the U.S. isn't broke yet. Sorry, I don't know how much I can trust the word of a person whose video description begins with, let an AI agent handle your SEO and marketing work. I mean, maybe.
US debt to GDP is almost as high now as just after the Second World War, and now Trump's tax cuts, foreign policy adventures, and proposal to double the US defense budget are projected to push it way higher. So, is the US heading towards a debt crisis? You'd think so. But there's one big problem. People have been warning about US debt for literally decades now.
Oh, is this like a climate change thing? People have been fear-mongering about climate change for decades and I'm not dead yet. Is it that kind of thing? Is that what we're talking about?
And before US debt to GDP will go even higher than after fighting a literal world war. So
debt to GDP is a useless measure because the GDP does not actually correspond to productive output of an economy or to tax revenue.
When can we expect something will break? When will the US enter the dreaded debt death spiral that hit Greece in 2012 at 172% debt to GDP?
Well, okay, hold on. The crisis doesn't necessarily get hit at a specific debt to GDP threshold.
Venezuela, Russian and Argentinian debts right before their collapse would be considered fairly low, fairly responsible. Instead, what all these cases had in common was that they had very, very high real interest rates just before they collapsed. That is, here you see interest rates minus inflation, that is real interest rates just before the collapse.
I've seen this one. He's going to cover most of your questions. If only I had time to watch a 15-minute video right now. I'm sorry for being mean to him. I'm sure he's great. Maybe we'll watch this video in a bit.